Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to 2022. I want to wish each and every one of you a wonderful new year. Today's January 1st of 2022, so this is the first podcast for this year. And we had a great time over the weekend, and obviously we enjoyed festivities on the 31st and so forth. But today's episode is actually episode 167. So once again, thank you all for giving me and giving our team the loyalty that you've been giving us for the last several years. And what I want to do is, the title for this episode is 2021 in Review. So I just want to give you a quick review of everything that, went on from a financial standpoint in 2021 and where we're at today. And, one of the things that I always say to all my clients and to everyone that I talk to is that, the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. So I am hoping that now moving into 2022 that you can do a little bit of a fact-finding and, just sit down with your family and try to go through all the challenges that you had in 2021 and see if you can make minor changes to 2022. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to throw away the baby out with the bathwater, but what it does mean is that you cannot continue to do the same things that got you into where you're at today and expect a different result. So at some point in time in your career, and in your personal life, you're going to have to do a paradigm shift or take a paradigm shift in some of the things that you're doing in order to try to achieve a totally different result and hopefully a more successful result from that perspective. I do encourage each and every one of you to pick up my book. You can download it on Amazon.com, and the name of the book is Retirement Paradigms, Managing Retirement Risk in the 21st Century, because a lot of the things that we talk about and a lot of the information that I give you and some of the ideas that you can use and make that paradigm shift that I've been talking about, you can actually find in my book, and it would be greatly appreciated. And I think you're going to find a lot of good information there as well. So let's get into 2021 and what are some of the biggest issues that I was able to see in 2021. And some of these, obviously, I would argue that most of these I have already covered somewhere, somehow in 2021. But I think it's important to bring them all up to the forefront at this point in time so you can start thinking about changes for 2022. Now, our national debt continues to go through the roof. We're now at $29.5 trillion. That's a tremendous amount of money to owe as a country. The federal tax revenues, and that's the amount of money that the U.S. government is collecting from Americans on an annual basis, and interest on investments and so forth, is now sitting at $4 trillion. But the challenge with that is that the federal spending, and that's the amount that the government spends every single year, is now at $6.9 trillion. So we have $4 trillion coming in and $6.9 trillion going out. So we now have a national deficit of $2.8 trillion, and that number will continue to get worse in 2022 and beyond. Can you imagine you trying to run your household in which you're generating $40,000 of income on a given year, but you're spending $69,000. How long do you think you and your family are going to be able to do that? Social Security, that continues to be a major issue for the U.S. We are now at $21.7 trillion in debt in Social Security, and then there's no way to pay it. Most people would say that over the next 8 to 10 years, Social Security is going to go in the red, and then obviously that's going to be a challenge. Some things are going to have to be done. Either pension benefits are going to have to be reduced, pension qualification is going to have to increase. So instead of waiting to 62, it may have to be pushed higher to 65 or 67 as a minimum entryway to Social Security, or a combination of both. But the challenge with politicians is that they don't want to tackle Social Security, because if they do, the individual that decides to tackle it is never going to get reelected, because if you start playing games or actually doing the right thing from an economic and mathematical standpoint to Social Security, you are not going to be very well liked in the country, and then obviously you're not going to be a politician for a very long time. Medicare liability, for those of you that are listening to my podcast, Medicare liability is worse than Social Security. Social Security debt is at $21.7 trillion. Medicare liability is at $33.7 trillion. What does that tell you? Well, it tells us that we have a lot of debt, and we have a lot of promises that we have made to the American people that this country just doesn't have the money to be able to keep. So when you total not only Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, billions and billions and billions of other debt that we have in this country, the total U.S. unfunded liabilities is now sitting at $162 trillion, and over the next 5 years, that number is going to get north of $200 trillion as a country. So from a business perspective, and I say this carefully because it's sad what I'm about to say, the U.S. has been bankrupt for several years now. The reason why we haven't we've been able to pay money in the debt is that we just keep printing money, and when we print money, then we're able to make the payment on the debt. But if we didn't have the ability to print money, we would have been bankrupt, I would say, probably 5 to 7 years ago. Now, the interest that we're now paying on the national debt, because, when you have a national debt of $29.5 trillion, no one is going to give you that money and not collect an interest on that money. So at this point in time, the interest on the national debt is sitting at $421 billion, which is fairly large, but still manageable because of the fact that interest rates are so low. Eventually, interest rates are going to have to get back to a normal rate, and when that happens, that $421 billion is more than likely going to triple, and then Houston, we have a problem from an economic perspective. Now, at the end of 2021, we saw something very interesting. Inflation is at a 40-year high. So we have not had this high inflation in the U.S. For 4 decades, and now we're experiencing that. In essential goods and services, and these are the types of services that we Americans purchase on a regular basis. On the overall, they exceed somewhere around 7%, but for many of them, the increase has been 20, 25, even 50%, especially when you start factoring food, energy, and gas prices. The cost of maintaining a traditional family in the United States has now gone through the roof. And that's a major, major issue. And the challenge is when we get into more and more debt, as we've done for the last several administrations, you can only kick the can down the road so long until somebody, at some point in time, someone is going to have to pay for. And the challenge is that if you borrow from Peter to pay Paul, things are good until Paul runs out of money, and then what is Peter going to do? So the other thing that is very challenging about printing money and getting high into debt is that the more money that the U.S. government and the U.S. Treasury prints every single year, the less value your current savings have in the United States. So therefore, I would argue that inflation is not only bad from a standard of living perspective, but inflation is a tax on your savings account, because your savings accounts in your local banks are not coming close to giving you an interest rate that is sufficiently high enough to offset the cost of inflation. So although you may see that dollar in your savings account, which they say, quote unquote, is guaranteed, that dollar is buying you less and less every single year due to the increase or the net increase in inflation. So those are some of the basic things that I was able to see in 2021 that are things that we all need to pay attention to, because at the end of the day, we're all impacted because we all live in the same country. Now, let's not even get into some of the political issues and the challenges that we have throughout the world, what happened in Afghanistan and what's going on with China and Russia and tariffs. And one of the good things is that the Build Back Better plan that Joe Biden had in mind to pass in 2021, it didn't go anywhere. Now, I'm sure they're going to try to bring it back in 2022, but, we need to thank Joe Manchin and I think it's Christian Sinema that prevented it from happening in 2021, because, these are Democrats that are middle of the road Democrats, and these are Democrats that in many different ways also think like capitalists. So they know that economics is about supply and demand, and they understand that the more debt and the more pressure you put on the American people, the more challenging it's going to be in order to be able to succeed in the future, not only from an individual perspective, but also from a country perspective. So those are things that are very, very important. Now, remember I said at the very onset of this podcast that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. So I think one of the questions that all of you and all of us need to ask ourselves as we start to prepare for 2022. And by the way, because of the fact that I've been a business owner for decades, every single January, actually I start doing this in the last 2 weeks of December, I start to take a look at my business, and I do some analytical calculations, what went right, what went wrong, what needs to change, what does the business world look like in my sector of the business, and, what are the paradigm shifts that I need to be able to make in 2022 versus 2021. So those are things that I have been doing for many, many years, and the sad part is that the vast majority of Americans don't do a good enough job at the beginning of the year in order to set themselves up for success in the current year that we're now living, which is 2022. So can we get out of this enormous debt? If I was someone running this country, are there things that I could do to get rid of the debt? And the answer is absolutely. And there are many things that can be done. Number one, if we do it carefully, we can accomplish a lot in a 5-year period, because, the first thing that I would do is I would reduce each sector of government debt by 10%. but not the way that politicians do it. Because when politicians tell you that, they're reducing the debt by 10%, all they're doing is they're reducing the increasing of debt by 10%. So if you had a department that needs $1 billion to run in 2022, and they're asking for $1.2 billion, if they ask for $1.190, then they're saying that they're cutting the budget by 10%. No, you're increasing the budget by $190 million, so you're not cutting anything. Now, if you need $1 billion to run the budget, and then you're going to get 10% less than that, then now you're cutting the budget, and that's the way that it should be done. Every single department in the U.S. government needs to cut their budget by 10% if they want to be able to get out of this hole, which is something that is critically important. And I think if from a national security standpoint, is something that needs to be done. And then obviously, if you start to cut the budget by 10%, we need to be able to stay the course for the next 5 years and allow the economy to catch up. And if we're able to do that, and then, we'll get to a point in time where the economic trends would outpace the expenditures that we have in this country, and thus is going to give us the ability to get out of the hole and become, more fortified and be able to be more competitive in the world stage. As an American, I think you owe it to yourself and to your family to fight government control and confiscation. So you have to take a look at all your retirement accounts and see which one of those retirement accounts are going to be easily accessible by the U.S. government at some point in time in the future. I don't care if you're going to retire in 10 years or if you're already in retirement. And if the government is going to dictate what percentage of your retirement assets they're going to get to keep from 1 year to the next, and they don't have to tell you about it until it's time for you to do your taxes, and then you'll find out the hard way, then I think it behooves you to kind of look at those retirement accounts and make the type of changes that need to be done in order for you to be able to control your financial well-being at some point in time in the future. Now, it doesn't mean that if you have $500,000 in a retirement account that you're going to move all of it to a Roth in 1 year in order to pay the taxes today at the rate that we're at, as opposed to where taxes are going to be in the future, because I can assure you that taxes in the near future are going to be a lot higher than they are today. But you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it systematically. You can do it on an annual basis, and then that way, every time you're moving to an account where now you have already taken care of the tax liability for the rest of your life in those accounts, then now you're starting to take control. So Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, permanent life insurance is another great benefit because of the fact that you have tax deferred growth in those accounts. And if you do it optimally, you can get tax-free distribution out of those accounts as well as a supplemental retirement plan. Municipal bonds, obviously, you have to be careful because of the provisional income calculation when you're calculating your Social Security benefits. But there are a lot of things that you can review, and it's important that you control your future tax rate by saving your retirement assets in tax-preferred vehicles like the ones that I have described. Real estate, for those of you that are in real estate, congratulations. For those of you that have never considered real estate, it's an asset that is important to own, because there are a lot of write-offs in real estate, and then if you need to sell the property at some point in time in the future, you're going to sell it at a capital gains rate as opposed to ordinary income tax rate. So you're going to be getting a tax deduction on that. And then you can do 1031 exchanges and you can continue to move that ball forward. So in reality, you are controlling your tax liability from 1 year to the next. Capital gains for me always works better than ordinary income rates because they're much lower. Another asset that is a newly asset, but all of you need to pay attention to are cryptocurrencies. So I encourage all of you for 2022 to start digging in and doing some research on cryptocurrencies and see what's available. Obviously, Bitcoin and Ethereum happen to be the best two coins that you can own, but I think it would be important for each and every one of you to take a small percentage of your assets and open a cryptocurrency account. You can go to crypto.com. You can use Coinbase. There are so many and they're available. But they're very volatile, so they can go up and down very, very rapidly. But over the long term, cryptocurrencies have been outpacing taxes and inflation 10 to 20 fold. So for those of you that have never looked into cryptocurrencies, I would encourage you to look into them for 2022. I'm not giving you financial advice. All I'm giving you is some ideas as to what are some of the things that are available in the marketplace, but you have to make certain that those ideas and those opportunities are suitable for you and also for your family. And then the last point that I want to make is that you also, for 2022, start thinking about, truly setting up the type of plan that will help you protect yourself and your family against the fatal four. And the fatal four, as I have talked on several occasions, is the risk of dying too soon, the risk of living too long, the risk of living with a disability, and then last but not least is the risk of living with eroding factors like what we're going through today: taxes, inflation, stock market volatility, interest rate volatility, propensity to consume. There's so many eroding factors that most Americans don't pay attention to, that by the time they look at it, it's quite late. 2021 was a very sad year. I lost two clients, of which two clients that are friends. All my clients are my friends, but I lost two particular clients that were close to me. The first one was my cousin who passed away from COVID in September. And my last one was now the last week of December, was a very good friend of mine and a good client who was 40 years of age. My cousin was 61. This other client was 40 years of age, and he passed away from leukemia, or complications from leukemia. What I can tell you is that no one ever dies at the right time. And you have to be able to protect yourself and your family in case that you don't wake up tomorrow morning. I tell my friends and my family that to me the worst 2 days in a week are yesterday and tomorrow. Why? Because yesterday is already gone. Whatever happened, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you can't fix it unless you move forward. And then the other bad day is tomorrow, because tomorrow is promised to no one. So take a look at your insurance planning. Take a look at what would happen if you don't wake up tomorrow morning. What kind of financial impact is that going to have on your family? Are they going to be protected? If they're going to be protected, how long are they going to be protected for? Is it long enough? If you have children that are already in college or they're teenagers, the planning may be a little bit different than if you have children that are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age. You're going to have to provide protection for a lot longer than just a few years. So take a look at the amount of insurance that you have. Find out if you don't wake up tomorrow morning, what can the insurance do? How much income can that insurance generate? Will that income be sufficient to maintain the standard of living of your family? And if the answer is no, start seeking options. Start pricing insurance. Obviously, you can all reach out to me because that's what I do for a living, risk management, so I can help you with that. The same thing in living too long. If getting old is bad, getting old and having no money is even worse. So you have to start factoring in your inflation and so forth and see how long is your money going to last. Are you going to run out of money before you run out of life? And that's a bad situation to be in. But when you're 55 and 60, you don't think about those things, or even 40, you don't think about those things. But when you start to get into retirement, now all of a sudden you start really seeing, what it takes for you to maintain your standard of living, and then whether it's going to take you to the promised land or not. So the risk of dying too soon and the risk of living too long is a major, major issue. Now let's compound that problem by the risk of living with a disability. If you haven't done any type of planning along those lines, it's important that you pay attention. Because if you have any type of long-term disability or long-term care issue or illness, you're going to need more and more money in order to maintain your standard of living, because now you're not healthy. So that means that whatever money, retirement assets you have to start pulling more and more money out of those retirement accounts in order to provide for your health and well-being and that of your family. And what will that do? Well, that's going to accelerate the distribution of your retirement assets, and more than likely, unless you're properly insured, you're going to run out of income before you run out of life. And that would be a really shame situation to be in. And then last but not least, there's the inflation risk and eroding factors and taxes and inflation. And our politicians don't care. And I don't care if you're on the left side of the aisle or you're sitting on the right-hand side of the aisle, they're all the same. They're going to be raising your taxes. They're going to be printing money. And at the end of the day, all they care is to stay in power and to make certain that they can milk it for as long as you can. And who are the cows that they're milking every day? Well, you and I, the American people. So you have to take control of your retirement assets, and you have to make certain that if you do something right in 2022, is that you look at every single area of the fatal four: living too long, dying too soon, living with a disability, and living with eroding factors, and make certain that you and your family are protected. Because if you do a good job in those 4 areas that I have just mentioned, then you can go to sleep at night. Then you're not going to have issues that are going to wake you up in the middle of the night, because you know you've done the very best that you can. Now, for each and every one of you, these situations are different. So if you need more help in some of these things that we've talked about, you can always reach out to me. You can call me at area code 786-766-1042. You can also send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at bertsalazar.com, BERTSALAZAR.com. And pick up my book, because a lot of these issues I cover in my book, and it's going to give you a different point of reference in which you can part ways and then start thinking as to how to reframe your 2022 business and personal planning versus what you did in 2021. And always remember that my goal for you and for your family, not only in previous years, but also now in 2022, as we are in January 1st today, is that my goal is to help you and your family, change the way that you see things. Because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So once again, Happy New Year to all of you. I wish you all the very, very best. I thank you once again for your loyalty and you're listening to my podcast on an ongoing basis. And we're going to have a great time in 2022. Always remember, I'm never going to pull punches. I'm always going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, because at the end of the day, you have to make the right decision at the right time and for the right reasons for you and for yourself, and most important, for your family. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.